The United States is considered a global hegemon, a country that paved the way for stability and security across most of the world, and therefore economic growth. They control the world's oceans, have the most successful and largest economy in history, the largest firms by market cap are mostly American, they have the top universities, they're a major food exporter with the best geography of any nation, the list goes on. But I'm not going to sit here and go over all of the strengths of the US, I mean there's other videos you can watch for that. I'm making this video to address the orange in the room because what we're seeing now of the current administration is a very real fear that the system which allowed America to be so wildly successful is being undone rapidly, potentially to the point of no return. The relationship other countries had with America, the trust and cooperation that was there, may no longer be what it once was just a decade ago. And that's what concerns me. Now, a lot of people have been betting on the decline of the US essentially since 2020 and even before. And I generally disagree with a lot of these exaggerations and these clickbait videos. Although they aren't quite the unopposed superpower that they were in the 1990s and 2000s, the long-term projection for the US, I would argue, is very good, providing that the Americans get their act together and don't do things that harm its own interests. Now that they are doing this, I do believe that the decline of the US and the potential for China to seriously rival them is much more likely than it would have been should they have continued with the strategy that has worked for them in the past. But if we look at the effective tariff rates, considering, all of the announcements that the administration has made, the effective tariff rate is now higher than the Smoot-Hawley tariff. Now, the justification for all these tariffs is that other countries are ripping the US off due to their export potential, and considering the US imports more than they export, the US now has a trade deficit of over 1.2 trillion. Now, the way the administration has tried to address this imbalance is with the reciprocal tariffs, where if your country is going to charge tariffs on our imports, we're going to do the same thing. It's simple, it sounds fair, and sounds like something people can get behind. But the thing about this is they're not reciprocal. First of all, these rates are not charging what's actually being charged coming into the US. If we use Japan as an example, who the US have stated that they charge a 46% tariff on US goods, if we go on the International Trade Administration's website, it explicitly states that the average applied tariff rate in Japan is one of the lowest in the world, and when averaged out for all products, it is in fact 4.3%. So the proposed tariffs are completely out of the scope of reality and are not reciprocal at all. Why is that? Well, it's because of how they calculated it. You've all seen the formula by now, but it's simply trade deficits minus imports, meaning that the tariff rate was calculated on the basis that it would eliminate the US's goods trade deficit with each country. That's quite a big feat considering the US is one of the largest markets for consumer goods in the world and also has the largest disposable income in the world. And the funny thing is, economists in the president's team did actually present options to carry out reciprocal tariffs on a number of countries, but in the end, these options weren't chosen. If people have disposable income due to wage growth and career progression, in other words, if economy good, then of course people are going to spend a lot, which means the US is going to import a lot. And in fact, some of the countries that were tariffed, like the UK for example, do not have a goods trade deficit with the US, yet they were still slapped with the blanket 10% tariff. These tariffs put in place have nothing to do with using them as levers to get other countries to do what the US wants. And whatever reason the administration is so hell-bent on focusing on these tariffs, whether it's a poor attempt to boost domestic production for basic goods like fucking shoelaces that get made in Vietnam or something else, it's going to get overshadowed by the broader impacts it will have. So what are the effects? Well, the immediate effect of a Liberation Day is in fact the idea that many people have been liberated from their investment funds. These announcements have completely broken through multiple trading zones of the S&P 500, with the S&P 500 trading like a meme coin over Monday. I mean, look at this. So with a recession looming and the fact that we're probably already in a recession, the Treasury Secretary has vowed to continue as planned, ignoring what the actual experts are saying will happen as a result of this trade policy. Prices will be dropped onto consumers. It will be passed on. We've already seen predictions for how much iPhones will cost, and it doesn't matter if semiconductors are exempt because there are obviously multiple other parts of a phone that will not be and that are made in multiple other countries. And you might think, oh, it's okay because companies can decouple from countries like China as they've been doing for the last 5 to 10 years. Well, Vietnam has been slapped with a whopping 46% tariff, a vital country, as part of the China Plus One strategy. If you make it harder for firms to operate in China due to national security or geopolitical concerns, which is very much understandable, then why would you impose tariffs on the next best nation to produce those goods? It absolutely baffles me. This is a country that has stood against China, the US's biggest rival for this century, for literally 1,000 years. They don't pose a national security threat to the West like China does, yet this is what the current administration is choosing to do. And of course, Russia was exempt from the tariffs. Now you might be thinking, oh, it's because they're sanctioned. But Iran has been heavily sanctioned by the US for multiple decades, but they still got the tariffs, so let's not try to give this administration the benefit of the doubt. We know that they are sympathetic to the regime, trying to avoid making any demands to the Kremlin directly regarding its war in Ukraine, and also it's important to note that the current president has had personal ties to senior government officials in Russia, oligarchs and other businessmen, on real estate development since the 1980s. And this isn't the first time that a right-wing populist party has been absolutely terrible on the economy, or specifically a faction. Hint, hint, the lettuce. And it's really interesting to see the parallels between what happened in the UK versus the US right now. We really need to think about the dollar and how its status as the world reserve currency might be under threat due to what's happening right now. These policies have undermined the dollar's reputation as a safe asset, which became glaringly obvious right after Liberation Day, where the US stock market fell at the same time as both the dollar and treasuries. Normally when the stock market falls, the dollar and treasuries grow up, as investors move their liquidity into safer assets such as these. The fact that all of these fell tells us that investors are pulling out of the US altogether. Europe is taking advantage of this as Germany plans to issue more euro-denominated debt due to the lifting of its debt brake to fund its rearmament. Not only that, but investors stocked up on German bonds sharply at the beginning of April, as investors are starting to see Germany as more of a safe haven. I'll move on from tariffs for a second, focus on other foreign policy related issues, because the imperialistic stance they've taken towards their long-term allies isn't helping them by any means. I mean, Canada has always been the US's closest ally and complementary neighbour for trade, work, and various other things. Yet they've been attacking them hard. Canadians aren't putting up with this. This is a country that cares deeply about social justice, and they were never positive about the current president to begin with. We can see this backlash take place not only from consumers as they choose to buy Canadian goods, as well as travel to the US less with tourism dropping, but also in Canada's political landscape at the moment. I mean, take a look at the massive shift in polling between the two parties. While there are other factors involved, like Mark Carney stepping up as leader of the Liberals, Poilievre not being very popular in the first place, you cannot deny that the US administration's foreign policy towards Canada has been massively damaging. All it's done is create a Canadian society that is more hostile than it's ever been towards the Americans, and has also combated the rise of right-wing populism in Canada, as the Conservatives, according to the polling, are unlikely to win the election. Let me know if you'd like to see a video on the Canadian general election as well. It doesn't just end there either. Elon Musk's meddling in European politics, mostly the UK and Germany, has left a sour taste in the mouths of the Europeans. Tesla sales are significantly down, 45% so far since last year, and are unlikely to recover as BYD solidly enters the market. Musk has made multiple claims stating that only the AFD can save Germany, despite the AFD's anti-American sentiment, and making claims and suggestions about many politicians in the UK. Due to Musk's running of the government in the US and all of the controversies he's involved himself in, he is strongly opposed in the UK, even by reform voters who can't seem to make up their mind about who's on their side. But the trend is very clear now. Musk is a very unpopular guy, and with good reason. The same is true for Trump now as well, where reform voters are now split on how they feel about it. Farage's supporters have tended to support Trump, but due to all of these issues, Farage has been forced to disassociate himself with the two fellas. And the way this administration is handling its internal affairs are not going unnoticed either. Everyone and their mum has seen the reports regarding a French scientist who was denied entry to the US due to messages on his phone expressing discontent of the administration's research policy. I mean, this is insane for a country that is supposed to be the leader of the free world and supposedly uphold free speech. The reality, of course, is the administration only supports free speech if it suits them, and acts upon their own interest when it does not. The administration is currently investigating senior government officials who refuted claims about election fraud in 2020, and regardless about what you hear about X, formerly known as Twitter, shadow banning and censorship absolutely does exist. And whatever your political opinions might be, this administration is clearly incompetent, where we get to see, for the first time ever, war plans over a Signal group chat. So, how did we get into this mess? You could point towards all sorts of factors. You can say that a lot of voters were dissatisfied with the Biden administration. You could say inflation was a big reason why voters voted the way that they did, and I'll get onto that in a bit. But fundamentally, at the core level, the responsibility lies in the people. All of this could have been avoided if swing voters in the swing states would have voted for the Democrats rather than the Republicans. It's as simple as that. You could also go back and say that the Democrats could have done different things to make their campaign more effective. I think a big one on people's minds is that things would have been different if Joe Biden resigned months before his awful debate, allowing Kamala Harris to go through a regular primary process and giving Dems more time to carve out her campaign strategy. And maybe it could have made a difference. But hindsight is a wonderful thing, and the odds really weren't in her favour at all, regardless of what happened. Just take a look at this. This tells you everything you need to know. 2024 was a really bad year for incumbent governments. The first time ever, every governing party facing an election lost their vote share. COVID was hard on a lot of people, but of course inflation reaching 10%. And despite the Biden administration's achievements, as well as their ability to secure a soft landing with the economy, people were not happy. And they did secure that soft landing. Not only that, but job creation was up, the stock market had a turning point in 2023 despite Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and GDP growth was back up to pre-pandemic levels, even outpacing China's GDP growth. While China was dealing with so many issues such as a population crisis, deflation for 2 years, their zero COVID strategy absolutely flopping, youth unemployment, the list goes on. For the average voter, the economic metrics were looking really nice in the run-up to the election, but people didn't feel like the economy was good due to the lasting impacts inflation had. And despite 2024 being a horrific year for elections, the Democrats actually fared a lot better compared to other countries. I mean, you can see the British Conservatives all the way at the bottom there, losing about 20% of their vote share. I mean, you could also argue that the Republicans really didn't do a very good job with their own campaign, as Trump absolutely flopped in the second debate. But you know what? I leave that for you to think about. The stability and certainty that we've experienced in the last 4 years from the administration is a thing of the past for the next 4 years at least. No conservative has ever been able to name a single law, policy, or Supreme Court decision from Obama or Biden that actually destroyed America. This is because the current president is, whether knowingly or unknowingly, projecting every time he says that his opponent is destroying the country and that we need to fight to get it back. It's this fighting that we saw on January the 6th which undermined the structure and institutions that made the United States such a successful and powerful nation to begin with. But amidst all of the chaos at the moment, the US can absolutely turn over a new leaf in the medium to long term. Again, America has absolutely everything a prosperous nation could want. It's abundant in most natural resources, it's oil independent now thanks to the shale revolution, has a very secure location, meaning that it could basically never be invaded, and its immigration system is a specific area of leverage the US has over its adversaries such as China. Although China's economic growth has been very impressive, the US's population and GDP has consistently grown over a long time period. We're talking like 50 years. China's economy has looked a lot weaker this decade and their population is slowly declining. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the US's long-term success comes down to the people. It comes down to the people who vote for the right governments, and it comes down to the governments that make the right decisions. It was the Biden administration's decision to support Ukraine militarily, economically, and with intelligence, and the destruction of the Russian military, the casualties, and the economic impact this war is going to have on Russia is invaluable. It's the current administration's decision to avoid the basic facts on the ground about its foreign policy, economic policy, and various other things, and is therefore why America's downfall is self-inflicted. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, and opposition groups are trying to react accordingly. We'll see where we are by the time the midterms come around and by the time of the general election, and hopefully by that point, the US will undo the damage that they've already caused. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you for the next one. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Please do reach out and tell me if there's something you disagree with, and let me know if there's anything else you'd like to see me talk about. I'm open to ideas. Take care now.